What's up everybody, Rebel here, and welcome back to Rebel Ranks, where I play a video game and milk it for as many videos as possible. And today, the bosses in Crash 4.
Darn you, Crash Bandicoot!
Bosses in the Crash Bandicoot series. Something that I would probably put on the second half of a pros and cons list, right along with story narrative. The core gameplay of platforming is what makes Crash Crash. However, after the over 20 years that this franchise has existed, I guess bad bosses is what made Crash Crash as well. At least until Crash 3 with Engine, which is still to this day an amazing boss fight. And here in Crash 4, the bosses try to be as close to the bosses in the original trilogy while also pushing them over the line into acceptable bosses. Probably because the bosses in Crash 4 ended up partially as hybrids of previous bosses and new bosses. There are quite a few examples of the mechanic from a past boss being used as a mechanic for a new boss here, except that'll be just one mechanic used out of a few, which really does end up fleshing these bosses out much more than any previous entry. And I have heard people say that there are too few bosses, and while in hindsight, yes, going into this game knowing what Crash bosses were before, I was fine with the amount of bosses. After seeing what they were able to accomplish, I wouldn't have minded a few more. There are only 5 bosses in Crash 4 with one mini boss, and obviously the mini boss doesn't really stack up against the 5 other bosses, so let's talk about Louise for a minute and then get into the 5 actual bosses. Louise, a sea monster from the Salty Wharf dimension. And it was actually a pleasant surprise to unsuspectingly have come across a mini boss in a game I wasn't even expecting one. There is a part earlier in the same level where you can see and hear Louise in the background. Pretty cool. The boss battle is on a jet board. You have to lure mice on TNT barrels to roll into Louise's tentacles. First 1, then 2, and finally 3 tentacles. It's a mechanic learned earlier in the same stage, and this mechanic is a little wonky to me. There were a few times when Louise would slam her tentacles right when a rat got close, avoiding my attacks multiple times in a row, which can be rather annoying. However, I will say that no boss battle has been on a jet board before, so that's pretty cool. And the mechanic to beat Louise is rather original. It is the only mechanic being used here though, and it does make this boss bland by contrast. Louise may be the worst boss in the game, but she is the only mini boss in the entire game, so of course this boss battle is going to stand out as one of a kind. As it should. And with that, we start the actual list. So coming in as the worst boss in Crash 4, number 5, Brio. Now Brio is one of my favorite characters in the franchise due to his nature in Crash 2, and I love him here as well. I think he's one of the best written villains in this game, staying incredibly true to his original intention. And the boss battle, it's his boss battle in Crash 1. It's literally his entire boss battle from Crash 1. Now, as I said, this game tends to mix multiple mechanics from past bosses to really flush out each boss. Instead of doing that, here they take the whole boss battle and fix every single issue it had before, while slyly adding an econo mechanic. Brio mixes some potions, throws some purple ones that explode, and green ones that turn into little sludge monsters. The area is much more open than in Crash 1, making evading him much easier. The depth perception issue isn't a problem here, so I've never accidentally ran into a sludge monster while spinning them back. And of course, as in the original, he consumes his potion and hulks out. In the original, he never stopped smashing, which ended up being super confusing as I didn't know when or where to spin him. Here you're given a Kano, so obviously you need to spin him, and after a moment he becomes dizzy, giving you the perfect opportunity to attack him. Brio may be the worst boss in Crash 4, but it is pretty impressive that they took a subpar old boss, barely changed a thing, and actually ended up with a pretty good boss when compared to the rest of the franchise. And the fact that once I realized that this was just the old boss battle, I had a huge smile on my face, showing that nostalgia can be extremely beneficial, even when the thing we're remembering wasn't that good. Number 4, the Tropies. And this boss battle, as far as I'm aware, doesn't take anything from bosses in the original trilogy, though that's solely because each phase in the boss battle utilizes the masks. And you may be thinking, well, there's only 3 phases. Lanny Lowly isn't in the boss battle. Well, I guess the sliding part before the boss battle is technically part of the boss battle. I won't really include it since it's just sliding, but the whoa part is pretty funny. The boss battle starts in the first 2 phases are you trying to get to the Rift Generator. The first section has you using a Kano to spin across huge floating platforms. It's nothing crazy, but it's pretty fun nonetheless. The second phase is just like the first, except the huge platforms move much faster, and now you're using Kapunawa to slow them down. A little less interesting than the first phase. Then there's the final phase, and this uses Ika Ika while running back and forth outside of the Rift Generator. And this is the weakest part of the boss battle. There are these pink energy bars, and you have to spin the base of them, and the base switches from the floor to the ceiling, all while avoiding blue orbs the entropies shoot shoot at you. And this part, I didn't like at all at first. I was always stopping to make sure I wouldn't hit the pink beams. However, it turns out you really don't have to stop if you use Ika Ika at the right moment. And doing so adds this fluidity to the boss battle that actually makes it slightly more enjoyable. All in all, this is one of the more uninspiring boss battles in the game. And the only reason that it's coming ahead of Brio is the fluidity that you could feel in the last section when you do it completely right. And Brio's boss battle is kind of unoriginal. Number 3, Engine. And what's funny about Engine ranking number 3 is that if I were to rank Engine's boss battles, this one would also come in number 3. Yes, his boss battle in Crash 2 is slightly better, being how unique it truly is with throwing Wumpa Fruit, and his boss battle in Crash 3 being the best boss battle in a Crash game. Engine's boss battle here most closely resembles Tropies' fight in Crash 3, giving you energy attacks to avoid before making your way across the arena with a slight platforming challenge. I guess a tiny bit of Koala Kong in that you spin some little rocker dudes at Engine, and this boss battle is pretty fun. Each phase adds a column where Engine's energy attacks come at you, starting with 1, then 2, ending with 3, before the column design is thrown out for a much larger platforming challenge across a crowd, all while his energy attacks are still coming at you. And there's a lot I like about this boss battle. The different energy attacks, the addition of room for you to maneuver before mixing it up entirely for the final phase. My only complaint would be that the platforming at the end with Lanny Lowly is somewhat uninspiring. My first playthrough, I just slid double jumped halfway up to get Engine anyways. Kind of a noticeable design flaw when it's that easy for you to completely skip the platforming sections. And I know that's a theme of Crash, being more skilled allows you to blow through platforming challenges, and that's great in a standard level. Not something that I think should be readily available to use to exploit bosses, at least not to this extent. Yes, Engine's boss battle does have a large glaring flaw. The platforming section at the end with Lanny Lowly is just not done too well. It's easily skippable and it could have been done much better. Besides that, this is a great boss battle. Number 2, Neo Cortex, the first one. And this is such a good boss battle. Cortex is up in some control booth thing and you're down below in some metal arena. You have Kapunawa and will be using her to make things easier for yourself. However, you can beat him without using her. There are 4 phases and each phase ends when you spin a robot with boxing gloves, the punch bot, up at Cortex, which once again is the main mechanic used by Koala Kong. The first of the 4 phases has you running away from a constant barrage of missiles similar to one of Engine's attacks from Crash 2. Second phase has Cortex launching energy attacks similar to Engine earlier in this game. There's green energy blades to jump over and purple things that you can't jump over or slide under. You have to run between them. And this is where Kapunawa will come in handy. The third phase launches the same energy attacks but much more frequently and faster. They come out in a row and you can either jump over the green or try to stand right between the 2 purple. On top of that, the missiles from the first phase are falling on you the whole time. There's a half phase here where Cortex makes the floor shrink to the middle while missiles fall on you. Seems like an intermission. And then the final phase where Cortex removes a lot of the floor. It's then more of the energy attacks. They come out in diagonal lines. There's the missiles and red energy attacks that come out in a straight row, requiring you to slide under them while avoiding all the missiles. There's so much going on here, and even though it's all pretty similar, utilizing the same few attacks, each phase is so different that you constantly have to adjust to the battle. Gone are the days of each hit point on an enemy being taken the exact same way throughout the whole battle. And it's glorious. And coming in as the best boss battle in Crash 4, obviously it had to be number 1, Neo Cortex, the second one, and one of the best boss battles in the Crash franchise. And the main premise of this boss battle is similar to fighting Crunch and Cortex at the end of Wrath of Cortex, in that all 4 masks you've used are being used against you. However, unlike that boss battle, this boss battle isn't incredibly boring and repetitive. There are a few phases here. The first phase introducing the Shoot-O-Matic, an energy weapon that when you jump on it, it destroys it. The floor will have tiles drop out from under you, similar to Tiny Tiger in Crash 2, and then you have to spin one of Cortex's minions back at him. Then is the second phase where Cortex uses Lanny Lowly against you, causing the floor to disappear right out from under you. Nothing special here, and once again the Shoot-O-Matic and a Cortex minion, and on to the third phase. This phase has Cortex moving horizontally while shooting lasers, very similar to Engine's attacks in Crash 2. Avoid these and he'll then use Ika Ika to flip gravity, as well as shrinking your running area. He'll shoot lasers while you're flipped, and Shoot-O-Matics and shoot a minion back at him. The fourth phase has Cortex using Kapunawa to slow down time off and on while he lowers all but a few platforms in a big circle. Shoot-O-Matics and shoot a minion. The fifth and final phase, which even though Cortex has 4 more health bars, this is the last phase and does finish him off. He uses Akano to make his control boost spin kind of slowly. 3 lasers come out and 4 shoot-o-matics pop up. Each shoot-o-matic destroyed causes more platforms to disappear. Once all 4 are gone, 4 minions will pop up, spin them all at Cortex, and that's the final boss battle and the best boss battle in Crash 4. Yes, Cortex's final boss battle is the best boss battle in the entire game. Each phase does something a little different, some more than others, of course. The hectic nature of the final phase standing out, as well as the third phase basically being the same moves as Engine in Crash 2. I will say that more could have been done against you with the masks. Lanny Loli's attack is just making the floor disappear. It's pretty easy to avoid, and when you get clipped and die, it's never a big deal. Ika Ika is only used to put you on the ceiling. The only thing noticeable about this section is that it's Engine's attack pattern. Kapunawa's part, I don't get at all. The other masks are used to be a hindrance, but when Kapunawa is used, it helps you? If Cortex's platforms kept moving fast, that'd be more challenging, so it's a little off. And Akano, who usually makes Crasher Coco spin super fast, only allows Cortex to rotate slowly. I do like that each mask is used, I just wish they were used better. Thankfully, the masks aren't what make this boss battle great. With most boss battles, each stage will have a progressively more difficult attack pattern, each giving you a phase finishing setup, then mixing it up completely for the final phase. Engine, Brio, and the first Cortex fight all follow this pattern. The second Cortex boss battle shows you the phase finishing setup, then gives you a platforming phase, an attack dodging phase, another platforming phase, and finally a phase where you're viciously attacked from all sides while having to platform the whole time. It truly is a great boss battle, one that mixes a lot of new with a lot of tried and true to bring one of the best boss experiences in the Crash franchise. And honestly, the only boss battle I might enjoy a little bit more would be Engine in Crash 3. But who knows, maybe in Crash 5 they'll put in a boss battle that mimics Engine's boss battle in Crash 3. And that's gonna wrap this one up. Let me know down below what you think of Cortex's final boss battle, or what your favorite boss is in Crash 4. Be sure to smash that like button if you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe for more great Crash and other platformer content. I'm probably gonna be talking a lot about Spyro in the next coming months, because I have a big feeling there's gonna be a Spyro sometime next year. But besides that, check out some old videos and some playlists down below. I got a bunch of Crash stuff and some other good stuff that's worth checking out. And besides that, I think that's gonna wrap this one up, and it might wrap up everything I have planned for Crash 4. There might be some other videos here and there. Who knows? Who knows? And until next time, peace.